See it still?
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is your favorite host, Rajita from a city. Today, we have a very exciting guest, Charles Brewer, CEO of Post Malaysia. Hi, Charles.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. What about you?
I'm fantastic.
Okay. So, I have a few questions regarding your professional journey and some suggestion for our students as well. So, let's start.
Sure.
So, having worked across Europe, Africa, and America, Asia, what is your rule for adapting to diverse cultures?
Well, I think there are a couple of points. One is every market is different. Every country is different. Every region is different. And whilst you should, for those students who are planning to have an international career and or those who are having an international career already, you should sort of hold on to what you believe in your value system and so on and so forth. Clearly, as you operate around different countries and different markets, you need to learn to adapt. Not entirely. You should be a bit of a chameleon. You should adapt to the local culture and the environment you work in, but at the same time, never forgetting who you are. So fundamentally, and by way of introduction and to those on the call, first and foremost, thank you very much for joining me, and I really hope you're all very, very well and life is treating you good. But you should, over the years, I've learned that you obviously should be a bit of a chameleon, but at the same time, as I said earlier, you should hold on to what you believe in as being correct and right. And whether it be working in Africa, and for those that I haven't met, I guess it's a majority of you. I've had the opportunity of working in I visited 122 countries now, I think it is now, and worked in every region, every continent. And my bit of a background on me: I started my life out in the UK. I'm British by birth. But then I knew when I first joined DHL, which was many, many years ago, that I wanted to work overseas. In fact, that was one of the things I said in my interview, was that I wanted, when asked why did I want to join DHL, it's because I wanted to work overseas. So, and a little bit by luck, a little bit by design, I've had the opportunity, as I mentioned, to work in many different parts of the world, including India, I hasten to add, and which is fantastic. And so, having started my life in the UK, I went from the UK to Malaysia, from Malaysia to the Philippines, from the Philippines back to Malaysia, from Malaysia to India, from India to the US, to America. I had to think about that then. Then from America down to Africa, running 52 countries in Africa, then from Africa to Dubai, from Dubai to Singapore, from Singapore to Canada, and then Canada back to Malaysia. And they're all, every part that I've worked in, every part of the world I've worked in, they're all unbelievably and uniquely different. Some differences are more obvious than others, but they are all different. And so, yeah, to answer your question, as I've been on that journey, which has been amazing, I learned fairly early on that you needed to be particularly conscious of the environments you operate in and the cultures you operate in, without losing sight of what makes you. So I think the short answer is hold on to who you are, but at the same time recognize that how you operate, how you behave, how you conduct yourself needs to be adapted to the markets that you operate in. Some of that's gone really, really well, and some perhaps not quite as well as it could have done.
That's amazing. So, basically, your life has been about just traveling and traveling around the world.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this today. In fact, I get asked very often. I guess some people sort of look at it and sort of with some sort of, that must have been amazing. Some people think it's a bit strange. My family and my brother and sister think it's a bit odd that I've traveled around the world and still have the inclination and the motivation to do it. And I have friends who have never left the cities and towns that they were born in. And it's not for me to judge what somebody else does, but personally speaking, I've had an amazing opportunity to witness and experience some amazing things in amazing countries around the world, including yours, I hasten to add. And that, for me, that's a good thing, but it's not for all, and I chose that path in part. I'm 61 now, but in part I chose that path because in my days when I was the age of some of the people on this call, there really wasn't the opportunity to touch and feel and see things virtually as it is today. If you want to see the Burj Khalifa, if you want to see the KL Towers, if you want to see the Dabbawallas in Mumbai, if you want to see the amazing country that is Canada, you couldn't really do that when you were sort of 20, 21, or when I was 20, 21. Today, of course, the world has changed quite significantly. So international mobility today, I think, is a little bit different to what it was when I was growing up. But as I said, when I joined DHL all those years ago, in the interview I had then, and when I was asked why would I want to join DHL, one of my answers was because I wanted to go and see the world. And as it panned out, that's exactly what's happened. But as I said, not for everybody. For me, it worked out really, really well, and I loved it. I've loved every single minute, but it isn't for all, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what is the hardest professional habit you had to completely unlearn as you climbed the ladder?
As I've climbed the ladder, I'm not so sure I had to unlearn it, but I've always been a very keen learner, and still am, today. And so, whether it be professionally or personally, as I said, that sort of path and that route and that opportunity has given me the opportunity to continually learn. And so, I'm constantly sort of challenging what I thought was right and what I think is right, and challenging how I operate and how I behave. And to your earlier question, how to apply that in different markets. And each place I've worked, when I look back now, I'm not so sure it's true when I was there, but when I look back now, I know that I learned a great deal, and it's shaped who I am today. And it's to, my children now are teenagers, 17 and 18 years old. I was talking to somebody earlier today that it's also shaped who they are, that international experience they've had, which is, I think, generally speaking, pretty positive. So I would be an advocate of it. I'd be an advocate, and my message certainly to those on the call would be, you're never too old to keep learning. And so to your question, what I thought was right 10, 15, 20 years ago, I challenge and constantly challenge whether it's right today. And, if you take today's environment and to bring it right way, sort of full circle to where we are and what we operate in today, as most of sort of digital transformation, AI in particular, is changing how we operate at an unbelievably rapid rate. And just yesterday, I was presenting to the board of Post Malaysia and of DRB HICOM on our AI strategy. And if you'd asked me 2 years ago, did I think I would be standing next to humanoids and thinking about how we would apply that in operation? Of course, I would have said no. So I think, the world around us, and increasingly so, is changing so rapidly. It's absolutely incumbent. I say this to my team that I work with today, and I have done most of my life, that, a clear thing that all of us as leaders need to do is to continually learn. You need to be at the front of the wave as best you can be, the front of the wave of what's happening around the world. So you're never too young and you're never too old to learn and adapt your personal style, but also the opportunities and applications and approaches that are available to us today, and apply those in your organization. So in simple terms, not necessarily unlearning, but continually learning. Just learn, whether it be reading a LinkedIn post, whether it be going to a conference and listening to speakers who are talking about things that perhaps not much about. Constantly making sure you're at the front of the wave as best you can be. It keeps you relevant. Again, I'm 61, but I think I'm still relevant. It keeps you relevant. And as importantly, if not more importantly, it keeps the organization relevant. Our customer requirements are changing all the time. The markets we operate are changing all the time. Globalization is changing all the time. There's a lot of things going on in the world, which some are not so good. But you have to constantly be learning and listening to how those environments are changing, so you can adapt what you do, but also, of course, what your organization does.
Okay, so you suggest to adapt and evolve, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if we come to the discussion of our students, when you review resumes of fresh graduates, what is the number one non-academic trait that makes you say, we need to hire them?
Attitude, 100% attitude. even, I mean, again, if you're going to be a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon, then content is probably more applicable than attitude in some respects. But in my environment, not to suggest for 1 second there isn't a lot of content, but we look for people with the right behaviors and the right attitude, the right intent that are going to fit the culture that we're creating in our organization. And so that certainly at my level, and certainly when I'm recruiting at the level I recruit at, we're looking for fit to the culture that we have. We're looking for behaviors probably more so than content. It's already given that, if on your CV you went to a great university or a great school, or you got X qualifications or Y qualifications, we take it as read that the content, the IQ side of the opportunity is probably correct, and so it becomes more relevant around sort of the EQ side, and that becomes more relevant. My daughter is just completing her first ever internship. She's at university in the UK, and it's wonderful to watch her. I hasten to add, but I talked to her a lot about this, that as she was going through her internship, it's not about what program she's studying so much, it's about how she shows up. And things that I say to my team, and we talk about it a lot in Post Malaysia, it's about things that you can control, not the things you can't control. And you can control whether you're on time, you can control whether you meet your deadlines, you can control whether you come in the morning with a smile on your face, you can control how you engage with your employees. So behavior, I think, even in today's digital world, and even with all the AI applications and agentic AI opportunities that exist, and possibly even more so, it's about how you apply yourself to those opportunities. So from my perspective, I think generally speaking, we're looking for, yes, of course, the IQ side, the content side, but equally important, if not more important, how will you show up within Post Malaysia?
That's great. That's a very important point you have mentioned. And you have a very interesting portfolio that says that you're also teaching at the Seichun University as an adjunct professor. That's very nice. So how do you teach graduating students to handle a professional landscape that never stops shifting?
Be brave. So I spend quite a bit of time. I'm involved with three universities here in Malaysia, and I do it. So I sort of have three buckets about what I try and achieve in my life and the legacy I leave. Clearly, one of them is the work. One is my family, and the second one is how I give back to the environments I operate in, and hopefully create great people for tomorrow. And it's a particular passion of mine. So I spend a fair amount of time with students, and again, talking about what you talked about, we talk about it in, typically I talk about two environments, two pathways. One is clearly doing the very best you can in the programs that you're studying, and making sure, as I said earlier on, particularly around how you can stay at the front of the wave of the subjects that you're studying, and learning about what sort of the most modern approaches are to that. But secondly, as I said earlier, it's about how you behave, and I think again, for lots of reasons, for students today, life is quite tough. I guess it's always been tough, but I think it's a little bit tough. I personally believe it's a little bit tougher still these days, with social media, with the rise of agentic AI and AI, etc. So robotics and so on and so forth. So we talk about trying to stand out. We talk about how you can differentiate yourself. If you again, in your environment, I'm sure you have hundreds of students, and if I rang any one of your lecturers and asked them, hey, tell me a bit about the students in your classroom. So if you got 15 people in the class or 20 people in the class, the lecturer will probably remember in years to come 2 or 3 people that stood out. And our job and in our environment, in work environment, the point and relevance of differentiation, both individually and as a business, is even more important. Consumers are very, very demanding. Organizations are very demanding. So you have to find ways to stand out. And stand out can be your demeanor. Stand out could be how you dress. Stand out could be your smile. Stand out can be your humor. Stand out can be your deliverables. Stand out could be how amazingly good you are at timekeeping. It can be whatever you want it to be, but you have to find a way to stand out, because when you operate and step out of a learning environment and start looking for professional positions, what is it that's on your CV that's going to put you 2 or 3 rungs ahead of the other 87 people going for that job? And that's the reality of life, unfortunately. It's a very, very competitive world, both from an organizational perspective to customers, but in hiring too. When I'm hiring for a position, even today, we will get it down to 3, 5, 6 people that we're talking about. And if you look at their CVs and purely look at the black and white part of the CV, at that level, there probably is limited differentiation. So it's what is it about you as a person that makes you stand out more so than somebody else? And I think that's so important that, again, rightly, wrongly, good or bad, it is a competitive space, and understanding that there are many things that you can do to stand out vis-a-vis the competitors you're up against will make a significant difference. So we spend quite a bit of time talking a bit about what that looks like. Is it somebody, if you've got 5 people in a classroom or 5 people in an interview and 4 of them are quiet, but one's an extrovert or one happens to have a slightly louder voice or his work is presented in a slightly better way, he or she stands out vis-a-vis somebody else. So, again, rightly, wrongly, it's a very competitive space today. So thinking about how you can differentiate yourself, how you can stand out becomes increasingly important as you go through your working career.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So what is the correct way for a young professional to approach a senior executive to ask for mentorship?
When I was much younger, a mentor once told me, it was I got 2 pieces of advice from him which have stayed with me pretty much my whole career, and they're really great bits of advice. One of them was identifying the 3, 4, 5, 6 people that will have the greatest influence and impact on you achieving what you want to achieve, and then finding ways to connect with them on a regular basis. And that connection can be in any form: WhatsApp, phone call, meetings, casual, formal, in whatever way. But you have to identify those people and then find a reason to connect with them on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. And again, you probably are familiar with this, but you would be amazed at the number of people who apply for a job or an opening and really haven't made that effort. And so the first time I meet them, or the first time my management team meet them, is when they come for that interview, which is normal. That's perfectly normal. And nothing wrong with that, except for if there's a person next to you who's done the groundwork months in advance to build some sort of relationship. They, as I said earlier on, they're already 1, 2, 3 rungs ahead of you just on the basis of that. So to your question, I think most senior leaders enjoy talking about their life. This is a good example. They enjoy talking about their experiences. They like being asked questions like, how would you tackle this problem? How would you tackle this opportunity? And so you'll rarely get a rebuttal from a business person saying, I don't really want to talk, if you ask the right question and if you engage in a positive way. In fact, you'll be surprised at how many are quite keen to talk about those opportunities or problems and have that discussion. And by doing so, using a phrase I'm not necessarily a big fan of, you're creating a network. You're networking with people that will have an influence on your career. So again, to those on the call and those listening, I would encourage you to think a bit about, based on the opportunity and the career path that you want to follow, who are the 4, 5, 6 people that are likely to have an influence on you being successful. So for example, if one of your students is sitting there thinking, I'd really like to go and work for Blue Dart, or I really want to go and work for whoever it may be. If you think about, okay, what's the role, and then who would have an influence? The head of HR would probably have an influence. The head of that department would probably have an influence. You can quite quickly identify and articulate the people that would have an influence on you being successful in getting that job. And once you've identified those people, start talking to them. Talk to them on LinkedIn, talk to them on whatever way you can. Find a way to connect, because when you go for that interview, they say, I know who you are. And again, even though this subject's been around forever and day long, the majority of people don't. And so the first time we talk about a candidate is when they apply for the job. And again, when I'm interviewing, it's not just me, it's normally me plus 3 or 4 others. And if those 3 or 4 others have zero knowledge of you other than you applied for the job, then you're not doing yourself or giving yourself the best opportunity to succeed. So make the plan and execute the plan to create those connections earlier, so that when you go for the interview, somebody in that room is saying, I know Charles and I know a bit about him. He comes and asks me about X, Y, and Z. I've met him outside. I know he does social work here, or whatever it may be. And therefore they have some input on you as a person. And that input is quite often the difference between you being successful and not successful. If it's purely cold, they're going to judge you based on your CV and that 1 hour discussion. If somebody else comes along, CV, 1 hour discussion plus has done 3 months of prep work, you've got a fairly good chance, or a better chance, I think, of being successful.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's very important to make the blueprint before even you start working.
Yeah, I mean, again, this may not surprise you, but it may. The number of people at senior level who come in and you say, right, tell me a bit about what you know about post-Malaysia, who say, well, I don't know a lot. Well, then it's not that it's wrong, and it's, no one's going to pass away on the back of it, but you're just not giving yourself a fair shout. Do your homework, do your prep work, plan the approach so it's not cold, so that hopefully you've got some relationship before you get going, and you'll be surprised at the difference it'll make, because so many people don't do it. And as I said, it's about differentiation vis-a-vis somebody else.
Yeah, right. Okay, so what are the 3 most critical financial lessons a student should learn?
What are the most critical? Sorry.
What are the 3 most critical financial skills a student should learn in their early age?
I think it's changed a fair bit, because so much is readily available through technology. You don't need to necessarily know everything. And I think that's a fairly good first point, which is you don't have to be a master of every single subject or every single area. I mean, by very definition, you're going to learn. Point 2 is that critical thinking, I think, is a skill set that, whether it be looking at ROI, whether it be looking at cash flow, whether it be looking at profitability, whatever it may be, but the ability to join the dots between data points from a fiscal perspective is more relevant than somebody who comes in and says, hey, I understand cash flow. Well, that's great. I mean, we can all do a program on that, but if you can understand how those dots connect and lead you to potential decisions, that's probably the most important. But to your question, I mean, again, I'll use my daughter as an example, who's not a particularly big lover of finance in her program that she's doing, but I made her do it, encouraged her to do it, because so much of life is based on the financial upside or downside of any of those decisions. So understanding how P&L works, understanding cash flow, understanding return on investment, I think is becoming increasingly important. But as I said, knowing the numbers and knowing the rows that fill out on a P&L is interesting, but red dots and connecting those dots is the key. Understanding how you translate numbers into asking the right questions of your organizations or asking the right questions of the department become increasingly more important.
I guess the financial awareness among all of the students should be taught from a very early age, from the high school level.
Yeah, 100%. So, again, depending on what position you're talking about, I mean, the financial awareness and understanding of financials changes a little bit depending on what you're doing. But as I said earlier, there are chips to get in the game. And so, like I mentioned earlier, my daughter as an example, it's not that she needs to understand the P&L back to front or be able to read annual reports and so on and so forth. And again, depending on what you're going to do in life. But having the basics, understanding the basics of a P&L, understanding the basics of cash flow, obviously super important, because most decisions have a fiscal impact, and so understanding how that's going to have an impact on the organization or on the financials of an organization, very important. But for me, more relevant is as I said earlier on, is the threads, the red threads. What do those numbers tell us? What do those numbers mean to us as an organization? What sort of questions should we be asking because of where the numbers are? So those where the dots are, connecting those dots, using critical thinking, using data analytics to understand, okay, on the basis of that, what sort of questions should I be asking? What sort of opportunities does that create? What sort of risk does that create? The interpretation of numbers, I think, is for me anyway, a little bit more important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so how do you advise highly ambitious students to prevent burning out before they even reach age 30?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, again, like I said earlier, I think life is a little bit more stressful these days, and a little bit it creates some imbalances between work and home and so on and so forth. So burnout for leadership, burnout for students, burnout for employees, I think is something we talk about quite often. So we talk a lot about the importance of understanding. There are three parts to it. First of all, understanding you have a problem, and not that you have a personal problem, but understanding what drives you to burnout. So let me give you a personal example. I'm not a big lover of having meetings at 6 p.m. at night to go through a P&L. That's going to send me to burnout. Yeah, it's going to make me put me in the zone of frustration. And so I know that has an impact on how I behave and how I operate. So we avoid it, and just being very, very open with your colleagues about what types of things will send you to the burnout zone. Is it delivering data late? Is it having meetings at 6 o'clock in the morning? Is it having meetings at 6 p.m. at night? Is it getting a P&L on a Friday? We work 24/7. Our industry is 24/7, but on a Friday night getting a 300-page report saying, can you review this and give me some feedback on Monday? It's going to put me in a very stressful situation. So first one is understanding what sort of things trigger a poor response, a poor behavioral reaction, and put you in that burnout zone, and being open with your colleagues and the organization that this is something we want to try and avoid. And we're all different things create different triggers for different people. So that's number one. Second one is, if you understand that, we talk a lot about this in Post Malaysia with our leadership team, about understanding what is your renewal zone. How do you renew so that you operate in a high performance as often as you can? And no one's perfect. We all get to difficult places at times. But if you understand what the triggers that will get you there, and you try and avoid those and manage yourself and your team to avoid those situations, is number one. Number two is, if you're there, what sort of things should you do to try and put yourself back in a better place? And that's for different people at different things. For me, for example, and I'm sitting in my gym gear today because I just went for a 6-kilometer run. For me, exercise where I can clear my head and have clear thinking space, whether it be cycling, running, playing rugby occasionally, exercise for me is a great way for me to renew and to put my head back in a positive space. It releases all sorts of endorphins that help me to be in a far better place than I would be otherwise. For other people, it could be going for a walk. For some people, it's their family. For some people, it's shopping. Some people, it's music. Knowing what sort of things you can do to manage that stress, and being brave enough and confident enough. I was telling somebody this the other day in my management team. Sometimes we get a little bit heated and close to the burnout zone in terms of our behavior, and so if that happens and we see it happening, we have a very honest relationship in my team and a very open culture. We just stop and get a coffee and just chill out for a few minutes, talk about things that got nothing to do with work, just to reset the head, reset your mindset so that you can perform at the very, very highest level. Yeah. And then the third element is, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. And what I mean by that is, I really, as well as disliking 6 p.m. meetings, which I was in one last night, by the way, but as well as avoiding, I know some of my trigger points, I'm not necessarily a big lover of Monday mornings. I know many people are not a lover of Monday mornings. So if you know Monday mornings are not when you're performing at your best, work out how you can get yourself in a state or a condition that means when you meet that first employee, we talk a lot about this in Post Malaysia, that our role is to be the chief energy officer. So when I meet that person in the lift on a Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. or whatever it is, and they're on their phone looking at their phone, as most people are, and they meet me for what would be the first time that week, and maybe the only time that week, how I behave is going to impact how they feel. And even as much as I dislike Mondays, I can assure you, when I'm coming in on a Monday morning, my music is very loud in my car. So I'm getting myself into a very positive state of mind, singing, windows open, whatever it may be. And when I get in that lift, I meet that employee, even as I'm internally, I'm thinking I really don't like Mondays, I can be the most positive person I can be for that person. You should make them feel better. You should create shining eyes. So know your trigger points, know how you can, what sort of things you should do to renew, whatever that activity is, whatever the thing is that makes you happy, knowing what you should do, and being brave enough to say, hey, you know what, I'm taking tomorrow off for 2 hours, or I'm going to go and take a longer lunch, or I'm going to do some online shopping, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go and run, whatever it may be. Making sure you invest in yourself to do the right thing. And then thirdly, even when you're not feeling your greatest, sometimes you just have to put on a brave smile and make sure your eyes are alight and you're making somebody else's life better than it was before they met you.
Absolutely. I think these are the little dopamines that keeps us moving forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for students wanting a global career like yours, what steps they should take right now to work overseas?
There are so many opportunities, and again, like I said right at the start, some talk about it but don't really mean it. Some talk about it and really want to do it. You know, from my perspective, it's being, I guess, 2 points. One is being brave enough to say yes, and to take that opportunity, and being brave and saying, I'm going to go and take that opportunity and grasp it. And the second thing is that, and again, I think it differs as you go through your career. So maybe at the start of your career, you have to say yes when may not be the most perfect opportunity. But certainly as you go forward, move with intent. Move with intent. Don't move going from India to the UK, or from India to Spain, or from Spain to France, or from Malaysia to Philippines, just for the sake of moving, I think is not necessarily a good strategy. And so when I was going through my career and started getting international opportunities, you know, the second tip I got from this mentor at the time was, think 2 jobs out, don't think 1. And most people just think, what's the next opportunity? And he told me, this is when I was sort of 21, 22, 23 years old, he said, you should try and think 2 jobs out. And when I talked about why, he said, because it's a jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to build this jigsaw puzzle of your capabilities and your capacity and your competency. And so if you're currently a salesman in India and somebody says, hey, do you want to be a salesman in Spain? Other than learn, if you said, right, I'm going to move to Spain because I culturally want to understand how Spain operates and how Europe operates, then that's moving with intent. But if you just went there because, okay, it's an opportunity to go overseas, I wouldn't advise people to do it. So think 2 jobs out. If I go and do X or Y or Z in whatever country it may be, in what way is that expanding the jigsaw puzzle? In what way is that giving me a skill set that leads me to the job that I really want, which is 2 or 3 jobs out? So I think you're going to find, and your students are going to find, plenty of international opportunities. There are lots and lots and lots. But yeah, move with intent, move with a plan. I'm going there. Like, for example, when I first came to Malaysia, and true story, back when I finally decided to leave the UK, I was offered a position in Russia. I was offered a position in Switzerland. I was offered a position in Malaysia, and I was offered a position in the UK. I had 4 job offers at the time when I first finally decided to leave the UK. And I chose Malaysia because when I thought about my competencies and my, the sort of spider web of experience, what I didn't have was anything from Asia. And Asia in those days was a fast growing region. It still is, but I didn't have any experience in Asia. I didn't have any experience with languages in terms of Mandarin and Chinese and so on and so forth. I didn't have any experience in what I would call core logistics. I was working for DHL Express at the time, and one of the things that DHL Express did and does today is simplify shipping, but that means you never become a true logistician. So the opportunity that I chose was of the 4 was Malaysia, because it was Asia, and so from a culture perspective, I really wanted to understand and learn how that sort of tidal wave of growth could impact my potential career. I wanted to learn about operating in a different language environment, and and specifically, and thirdly, the job offer was running the logistics division of DHL Express, or DHL in those days, which I felt I didn't have and would land me in a good position 2 jobs out. So Whereas the other ones were pretty much doing the same as what I was doing at the time in the UK, just a different country. And as I said earlier, I don't think that's necessarily always the best strategy. So if you're going to move overseas, I think you're going to find there are plenty of opportunities for those that are brave enough to do it. But move with intent. Don't do it just because somebody says, hey, come to the UK, or somebody says, hey, come to Spain. If it doesn't tick boxes in terms of expanding you as a person, I think you may regret it in the longer run.
Wow, that's very intriguing. Okay, so you had a presentation.
You would like me to go through it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, I'll walk you through, and I think, let me just see if I can bring it back up. Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So how do I move forward? One second. Is that changing screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, we've covered a lot of it. Much in this presentation we covered already, but again, just as a sort of brief overview, I'm English by birth, married to a Malaysian, and an Arsenal fan for those who are interested in football. And with the World Cup going on, I happened to watch England this morning, which was rather depressing. And as it says here, I've had a fantastic opportunity to work now in 123 countries, or visiting 123 countries, and mainly I've worked in the post and parcel space. So, as we covered, I started life in the UK, and from there I came to Malaysia, as I say, where I am today. And from Malaysia, I went off to the Philippines, and from the Philippines, I came back to Malaysia, and from Malaysia, I was in India. And you can see me on the left-hand side there, a very young leader in those days. And as I was saying earlier on, everywhere I've worked, I sort of taken things away that have really shaped who I am as an individual. And in particular in Asia, I learned about, there is, again, you may not appreciate it, but that generally speaking in Asia, the work ethic is so significantly different to the UK. So that's one of the key things I learned. I learned in India that elephants appear in very odd areas. I was sitting in a meeting, and when this photo was taken, I was sitting in a meeting with that group of people, and the curtain was moving, and I was looking at a very dark room, I hasten to add, and I was looking at a friend of mine saying, did you see that curtain move? And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about, child. And a few seconds later, the curtain moved again, and this went on for about an hour. And I said, look, I'm not joking. I'm not imagining it. That curtain is moving on a regular basis. And it turns out it was one of these elephants whose trunk was coming through the window to steal apples and fruit from a bowl that was sitting on the windowsill. So the experiences I've had in Asia, apart from work, have been absolutely amazing. And as I said, from India, I went across the US, and the US DHL had just bought a very large domestic operation called Airborne Express, and it wasn't going very well. And so I went across the US, and I learned there about one of the key takeaways I take from my experience in the US was the value of honesty. And that sounds very obvious, but the acquisition that we'd made in the US wasn't going so well. And sometimes in life, you'll face situations where things aren't going so well. And I learned, in particular in the US, I learned the importance of being honest and saying it's not going very well and asking for help. And what we did instead is and many companies do this, and this happens quite often, that people sort of bury the truth for fear of it being seen as a weakness. And that's the worst thing you can do. And I encourage my team today, and I have done everywhere I worked, if we have an issue or we have a problem, small or big or large, share it and talk about it, and you'll find somebody that is able to create some value and help you sort and solve that problem. And then from the US, I went down to Africa and was based in Cape Town, and I ran for DHL. I ran the whole of Africa, which was fantastic. And again, learned so much about myself, and I learned so much about the region. I learned so much about business, but in particular, I took away from my time in Africa humility. And what I mean by that is, for those perhaps on the call may not have children, but you will do one day if not already. And of course, our children today want everything available to them all the time, whether it be Wi-Fi or whatever else. And I was in Rwanda on one business trip, and I'd gone to a village where many of the wives that had been hurt during the wars in Rwanda were living and working in non-profit organizations and whatever else, and which was very sad, I hasten to add. It's one of the saddest environments I've been to see, but a country that rebuilt itself. But to the point, I met a young boy there whose name was Charlie by coincidence, and his sole possessions in life was one t-shirt, one pair of shorts, and not two shoes, but one shoe. And but he was the happiest 7-year-old that I met in Africa. And I came home to my family in Cape Town, and my son and daughter, who were not too different in ages in those days, their greatest worry in life was whether the restaurant that we were going to had Wi-Fi. So I learned the value of, I learned a lot about humility when I was in Africa. And then from Africa, I went up to Dubai, and I left DHL at this point and ran a startup. And again, I learned the value of money. And what I mean by money is when you work for DHL, which is a huge organization operating in 220 countries worldwide, if you need $10 million to open a facility, you just send 1, 2 or 3 pages to the head office, and 2 or 3 days later, the 10 million arrives. In a startup, you have to get up in the morning and go home at night worrying about whether you can pay people salaries and raising funds. So that was and I did it because I wanted to know whether I could survive without DHL behind me. I wanted to know whether I was as good as I thought I was. And so I went and, as I said, did a startup in Dubai and across India and across Africa, a logistics company, which eventually was sold to Agility. And then from Dubai, I went to Singapore and started running e-commerce, DHL e-commerce in those days. So I went back to DHL. I was asked to come back and run their e-commerce division globally for them, which brought me to India on a regular basis with Blue Dart and others. And again, that was sort of my first introduction to e-commerce, and I learned all about e-commerce and how important that was going to be in the world. From there, I was in backwards and forwards to Germany, the head office for DHL. And from Germany, I went to Canada. I promised, at this point, by the way, I'd promised my wife that we wouldn't move again because we'd moved so much, as you can see. And then lo and behold, we were off to Canada and spent a couple of years there during COVID. And then I'm a firm believer in fate. And my wife had said that she wanted to, my wife's in the picture, wanted to come back to Malaysia. She's Malaysian. And so some 20 years after we'd left Malaysia, we came back to Malaysia in 2021. So as I mentioned, and as you asked me, many things I've learned over my time, and I won't go through these again because I think we've already talked about them and covered them. But no matter where you work in the world, people are, and it's an easy thing to say, but people are your greatest assets. So learning how to motivate an African or a Malaysian or an Indian or a Filipino or whichever country and region you're in, that skill set around how you excite and engage your employees still is true regardless. And one of the most interesting parts of my life was when I was in the Philippines, and I learned that you can motivate or demotivate an employee in the same sentence, just how you say it. So how you say good morning can make them happy or unhappy. So it really was it taught me a lot about the importance of your body language, behavior, how you say things can really make a big difference. And today in Post Malaysia, we have 15,000 employees, from postmen and couriers all the way through to whatever. And it's still true today. You can, despite all the things that have changed around the world, it's still the same thing. So many things that I've learned. In Post Malaysia, we have a very diversified business. We do about 1 million letters a day. We do about 150,000 parcels. We have a really fantastic business, a 200-year-old business. And like all postal operators, including India Post, I hasten to add, we're going through significant transformation. And, again, that sort of, particularly that US experience around honesty helped me when I first came back into Malaysia and first started running Post Malaysia, helped me understand the importance of being honest about where the business was. The board and my boss very keen to understand, how would we transform post Malaysia, and we started with being honest. Where were we? And some people don't like honesty, and it can be a bit painful at times to say, look, this is the truth about where we are as an organization. But that was our starting point. Our very first meeting, our very first senior management meeting, our very first board meeting was, hey guys, I need to tell you a bit about where we are as a business. And things like, we had a dysfunctional culture, we have a hugely bloated organization, poor customer service, poor service levels. I mean, pretty much across the board, the business needed a pretty big shake-up. But the starting point is being very honest around where you are. I think this is a video. I'm not sure if this will work. Will the video work if I play it? Good one. Okay, so you can also see, by the way, I've lost 35 kilos or nearly 40 kilos since I started back in 2021, which is, being fit to lead is an important attribute for a leader. You need to, as you asked earlier about stress and burnout, you need to make sure you stay as fit as you possibly can, because it gets pretty tough at times. Anyway, so from that, when you work in an organization, you want to stay really, really close to your front line. If you're in banking, it's the tellers. If you're in post and parcel, it's the postmen and couriers. Wherever you end up working, staying really close to the heartbeat of your organization, the front line. We encourage all of our leaders to spend 70% of their working time on the front line, either with an employee or with a customer, because you learn what's really working and what's not working. So from that, those early days, we developed a transformation plan, which you can see here. I won't bore you with it. And I'll show another video, which will show you how we're doing since we embarked on that transformation plan, which is pretty good.
Post Malaysia, jom semua wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Post Malaysia, jom semua wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Post Malaysia. Post Malaysia. Post Malaysia. Post Malaysia. Post Malaysia, jom semua wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Post Malaysia, jom semua wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Post Malaysia. Pose Malaysia. Pose Malaysia. Jom semua wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Pose Malaysia. Jom semua wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Pose Malaysia.
Sepanjang tahun ini.
Pose Malaysia.
Happy lah sebab balik ke tempat yang saya rasa tak fikir pun untuk pergi, sebelum saya boleh sampai dulu ke tempat.
Bila kita beralih pada Indonesia, saya nampak dari segi kesempurnaan produk kita hantar itu baik. Dan kita
Happy lah sebab balik ke tempat yang saya rasa tak fikir pun untuk pergi, sebelum saya boleh sampai dulu ke tempat.
Bila kita beralih pada Indonesia, saya nampak dari segi kesempurnaan produk kita hantar itu baik. Dan kita terima feedback banyak, mereka terima produk dan rasa dengan baik dengan duit Indonesia.
Selagi ada bintang dan marilah menuju ke cemerlang. Marilah semua wira, marilah menuju ke cemerlang. Wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Jom semua wira ke arah masa depan yang cemerlang. Pose Malaysia. Pose Malaysia.
Okay, Charles, thanks for the presentation. I think we are a bit in short of time.
Sure.
Lovely presentation. It's really great to see all of your experiences. So thank you very much for today's session, and I hope our students absolutely enjoyed learning about your experiences. And yeah, that was a really insightful session.
You're welcome. No problems.
Okay, hoping to explore a collaboration with you, and you are cordially invited to Bangladesh and our office.
Hi. Thank you very much.
Okay, it was lovely to have you on board, Charles. See you again. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.